Be me Philip, just a regular guy. I'm a licensed electrician, but I can do most carpentry and general contracting work. Grew up in a house where my dad fixed everything himself, so I picked it all up. Live in a decent-sized town, not too big, not too small. You know everyone, or at least you know someone who knows them. I like my work. It's honest. You start with a problem, you finish with a solution. Wires are a mess, you make them neat. A room is dark, you bring it light. Simple. Don't get involved in politics or online drama. I have my own life to worry about. Go to work, hang out with my friends, watch the game, maybe go fishing on the weekend. So one day, I'm scrolling through the local news site on my lunch break. See an article that catches my eye. The old community hall on the east side of town, the one that's been abandoned for like a decade, is finally getting renovated. Good news, I thought. That place has been a real eyesore. Broken windows, graffiti, weeds everywhere. The article says a nonprofit group got a grant from the city to fix it up. The group is called the Women Rise Collective. Okay, cool. A women's group. Don't really care what it's called as long as they fix the place. The article has a big picture of the group's founder and leader, Tiana. She's standing in front of the rundown building with her arms crossed, smiling. Looks very confident, very sure of herself. The article is basically just a long interview with her. She talks a lot about their mission. They want to turn the building into a place called The Haven. It's supposed to be a safe space for women, a place for workshops, community meetings, and art studio, that kind of thing. Sounds fine, nothing wrong with that. But the way she talked was intense. Lots of buzzwords. She said the project was about more than just construction. It was about dismantling patriarchal structures and creating a space entirely free from the male gaze and its inherent toxicity. She mentioned that the renovation would be done entirely by female volunteers, a way to empower women to reclaim skills in spaces typically dominated by men. I read that and just kind of shrugged. Seemed a little preachy, but whatever. Their project, their rules. I finish my sandwich and go back to work, forget all about it. A week or so later, I'm having a beer with my two best buddies, Mike and Dave. Mike's a plumber, a real master at his craft. Dave is a general laborer, strong as an ox, and knows his way around any construction site. We've done side jobs together for years. We're talking about work, and I mentioned the article about the old community hall. Dave knew all about it. Oh yeah, that place. My cousin's wife is part of that group. They're all super excited. Mike laughed. Good luck to them. That building's a wreck. The plumbing in there is ancient, all galvanized pipe, probably rusted solid. I nodded. The wiring is worse. I did a walkthrough for a different potential buyer years ago. It's all original knob and tube, with some sketchy updates from the 70s. It's a fire hazard waiting to happen. The whole place needs to be gutted down to the studs. We sat there for a minute. Then I had an idea. It wasn't a political idea or anything. It was just a practical, neighborly thought. You know, I said, we've got a couple of free weekends coming up. What if we offered to help them out? Mike looked at me. For free? Yeah, why not? It's a community project. It'll make the neighborhood look better. We could at least help them with the heavy demo and the dangerous stuff, like the electrical and plumbing rough-in. Get them started on the right foot. Dave chimed in. I'm in. I'd rather spend a Saturday doing something useful than sitting on my couch. Mike thought for a second, then drained his beer. All right, screw it. I'm in too, but if they're weird about it, I'm out. So we agreed. We were just three local guys with skills, offering to help our community. What could possibly go wrong? A few days later, I saw a flyer posted at the local hardware store. The Women Rise Collective was hosting a community kickoff event at the site. It was for that Saturday. Perfect timing. We decided we'd go down, introduce ourselves, and make our offer in person. Seemed like the right way to do it. Saturday rolls around. It's a nice sunny day. We head over to the old community hall. There's a decent crowd, maybe 40 or 50 people, almost all women. There's a guy from the local paper with a camera and a woman who looked like a blogger. A long table was set up with coffee and donuts. Tiana was in the middle of everything, talking, laughing, directing people. She had a real presence, I'll give her that. We kind of hung back, not wanting to intrude. We figured we'd wait until she was done with her speech. She eventually stood on the front steps of the building with a megaphone. She thanked everyone for coming. Then she launched into a speech that was pretty much a word-for-word repeat of the newspaper article. Lots of talk about sisterhood, empowerment, and building a sanctuary. She pointed at the decaying building behind her. "For too long," she said into the megaphone, "spaces like this have been designed and built by men, for men. The very architecture reflects a world we are trying to change, but we are going to change it with our own two hands." A bunch of women in the crowd cheered. "This will not be just a building," she continued. "It will be a statement that we don't need permission and we don't need help from the very systems we are challenging." More cheering. Me, Mike, and Dave just looked at each other. It was a bit much, but we were still there to be helpful. After the speech, people started mingling. We saw our chance. We walked up to Tiana as she was talking to a small group. We waited patiently for her to finish her sentence. I stepped forward. "Excuse me, Tiana?" She turned to me. Her smile was bright and political. "Yes?" I put on my friendliest, most non-threatening voice. "Hi, my name is Philip, and this is Mike and Dave. We live just a few blocks from here." I pointed down the street. "We saw the article about your project, and we think it's great that someone's finally fixing this place up." Her smile stayed in place. "Thank you. We're very excited." "So," I continued, "we just wanted to offer our help. I'm an electrician, Mike here is a plumber, and Dave's got years of construction experience. We know this building has some serious issues, and we'd be happy to volunteer some of our weekends to help you with the tough stuff. The demolition, the wiring, the plumbing. No charge, of course. Just want to help the community." The smile vanished from her face. It didn't just fade, it was like a switch was flipped. Her expression turned to stone. She looked at me, then at Mike, then at Dave. It wasn't a friendly look, it was a look of suspicion, of contempt. There was a long, awkward silence. The people around her had stopped talking and were watching us. She finally spoke, her voice several degrees colder than before. "Thank you for the offer," she said, drawing out the word like it tasted bad. "But that won't be necessary." I was a little taken aback. "Oh, okay. Well, it's just that the wiring in here is pretty dangerous," and she cut me off. She raised her voice slightly, enough for everyone nearby to hear clearly. "We are perfectly capable of managing the renovation ourselves. The entire point of this project is to create a space for women to learn and thrive, free from male interference." It was getting really awkward now. I could feel my face getting hot. I tried one last time. "Look, I'm not trying to interfere. I'm just offering a hand." Safety is a big deal on a job like this. That's when she turned it into a public lesson. She took a step back and addressed not just us, but the whole circle of people listening. "This, right here," she said, gesturing towards us with a sweep of her hand. "This is a perfect example of what we're talking about. The assumption that women can't do something, that we need men to rush in and save us." My jaw just dropped. Mike and Dave looked like they'd been slapped. "We're not saying that," Mike muttered. "We're just—" Tiana ignored him, her voice ringing with self-righteousness. "This space will be built by the hands of our sisters. We will learn together, we will build together, and we will do it without the toxic masculinity that plagues the construction trades. We do not need your help." The message was crystal clear. We were the problem. Our offer wasn't a kind gesture, it was an act of aggression, an invasion. There was nothing left to say. We were completely humiliated. I just nodded slowly. "All right, understood. Good luck with the project." We turned around and walked away. I could feel dozens of eyes on our backs. As we were leaving the property, I glanced back. I saw one woman in the group, a younger woman named Katie, watching us go. She wasn't sneering like some of the others. She just looked uncomfortable, like she knew Tiana had gone too far. We didn't say a word to each other on the walk back to my truck. What was there to say? We just got in, and I drove us back to my place. We ended up sitting in my garage, drinking a beer in complete silence for about 10 minutes. Finally, Dave spoke. "Well, that was something." Mike just shook his head. "I told you if they were weird, I was out. I didn't expect a public execution." "She called my entire profession toxic," I said, still trying to process it. "I've been doing this for 15 years. I take pride in my work. I'm not toxic." It was a classic case of no good deed goes unpunished. We finished our beers and decided to just forget the whole thing. They had their project. We had our lives. Let them get on with it. For the next few weeks, the Women Rise Collective was all over local social media. Every day there was a new post. Pictures of a dozen women in brand new hard hats, all clean and shiny. Pictures of them smiling and holding up hammers and paint rollers. They all wore matching t-shirts with the NGO's logo on them. Tiana would write these long, gushing captions under every photo. Day 1, Demolition Day, so empowering to tear down the old to make way for the new. The picture was of 2 women struggling to pry a piece of trim off a wall with a small crowbar. Day 5, the haven is taking shape. Look at the progress we've made with the power of sisterhood. The picture showed a room that they had swept clean. The pile of debris was still in the corner. Day 10, painting party, bringing color and life back into these walls. It's so healing to work in an environment free of judgment. The picture was a group of them painting over water-stained, crumbling plaster. They weren't scraping or priming, just slapping a coat of bright pink paint right on top of the damage. As a professional, it made me physically cringe, but they were having fun, or at least, they were posting like they were having fun. The comments were always a flood of support. You go, girls. So inspiring. This is what feminism looks like. I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. But their project was right on my way to the supply house, so I drove by it almost every day. For the first month, there was a lot of activity. I saw them carrying out old furniture, pulling up disgusting old carpets, cleaning windows. It was all surface-level stuff. The kind of work that makes it look like you're making a ton of progress, even when you're not touching the real problems. The structural, electrical, and plumbing issues were still there, lurking under the fresh coat of paint. I remember one Saturday, I was driving by and saw them trying to take down a non-load-bearing interior wall. There were about 5 of them. They had one sledgehammer. One woman would take a swing. The hammer was clearly too heavy for her. The swing would be wild, and it would bounce off the plaster with a dull thud, leaving a small dent. Then she'd be out of breath and hand it to the next woman. They were taking turns, laughing about it, but they were getting nowhere. I just shook my head and kept driving. It wasn't my problem. Then, about a month and a half into their project, the social media posts started to slow down. The daily updates became weekly updates. The triumphant tone started to sound a little more strained. The pictures showed less smiling and more frustrated expressions. The easy work was done. Now they were face to face with the real, difficult, and dangerous parts of a renovation. The parts you can't learn from a 5-minute YouTube video. I heard from Dave's cousin that they had their first major issue with the plumbing. They tried to install a new toilet in one of the bathrooms. They didn't shut off the main water line correctly. When they disconnected the old toilet, a corroded valve broke, and water started spraying everywhere. They panicked. It took them nearly an hour to find the main shutoff in the creepy, dark basement. By then, the bathroom and part of the hallway were flooded. They spent the whole weekend with buckets and a wet-dry vac they didn't really know how to use, trying to clean up the mess. That incident never made it to their social media page. Then came the electrical. This was the part that actually worried me. You can mess up plumbing and get a flood. You mess up electrical, and someone can get killed. I knew the state of that building's wiring. It was a tangled nightmare. One evening, I was walking my dog and took a route that went past the hall. The lights were on inside. I could see a few of them huddled around the main electrical panel. The panel door was open. I saw flashes of light. I heard a yelp. One of them was trying to figure out which breaker went to which circuit by flipping them on and off. Another one was in a different room, shouting back whether the lights went out. It's the amateur way to map a panel, but what really concerned me was seeing one of them holding a multi-tool, poking around inside the panel itself. I almost went over there. I almost knocked on the door and told them to stop before one of them got seriously hurt. But then I remembered Tiana's speech. I remembered the look on her face, the humiliation. We do not need your help. So I kept walking. It's not my job to save people from their own pride. The next day I was at a coffee shop, and I happened to see Tiana and the woman Katie sitting at a table outside. I couldn't hear everything, but I could tell from their body language that it was a tense conversation. Katie looked stressed. She was gesturing with her hands, looking earnestly at Tiana. I caught a few snippets of what she was saying. "It's just not safe, Tiana. None of us are qualified. That short circuit yesterday could have started a fire." Tiana was having none of it. She sat there, stiff and unmoving, with that same self-righteous look she'd had at the kickoff event. She shook her head, her voice low but firm. "We knew this would be a challenge, Katie. That's the point. We are overcoming challenges." "This is more than a challenge. It's a hazard," Katie insisted. "Maybe we should just hire a professional for the electrical. Just that one thing. No one has to know." Tiana's response was sharp. "That would be a betrayal of our entire mission. We cannot and will not bring a man into our space to fix things for us. It would validate every skeptic. We have to see this through ourselves. You need to have more faith in the process. And in your sisters." Katie slumped back in her chair, defeated. The conversation was over. Ideology had won out over common sense. I knew right then and there that this project was doomed. It was no longer a question of if it would fail, but when and how badly. The project slowed to a crawl. The happy, energetic group of volunteers dwindled. Soon it was just a core group of about 5 or 6 true believers, including Tiana and Katie, showing up on weekends. They weren't really building anything anymore. They were just trying and failing to fix the problems they had created. The half-demolished wall was still there. The floorboards in the bathroom were warped from the flood. And a good portion of the building's lights no longer worked because of their experiments with the wiring. The haven was starting to look more dangerous and dilapidated than it had when they started. Meanwhile, my life just went on as normal. One afternoon, I was at the local animal shelter. My old dog had passed away a few months prior, and I was finally ready to think about adopting another one. I was talking to the director, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable. The shelter was clean, and the animals were well cared for, but the building itself was falling apart. The kennels were old and rusty. The lighting was dim. The floor was cracked concrete. Mrs. Gable sighed as she showed me around. "We do our best with what we have," she said. "We run entirely on donations, and there's never enough to cover major repairs. Our dream is to build a new kennel block, but that's years away." I looked around at the flickering fluorescent lights and the aging cages. And then I had another idea. It was the same idea I'd had before, but this time I had a feeling it would be better received. I went home and called Mike and Dave. I told them about the shelter. I told them about Mrs. Gable. I told them I had a place that could actually use our help. A place where our skills would be appreciated, not seen as an insult. "What do you think?" I asked. "Spend a few weekends helping out some dogs and cats?" Dave didn't hesitate. "I'm in. I like dogs more than people anyway." Mike laughed. "Yeah, me too. Count me in. At least a dog won't accuse you of toxic masculinity for fixing its water bowl." It was settled. The next day, I went back to the shelter. I found Mrs. Gable cleaning out a cat enclosure. I told her who I was and what I did for a living. I told her about my friends, and then I made her the same offer I had made to Tiana. "Mrs. Gable," I said, "my friends and I would like to volunteer our time to help you fix this place up. We can rewire the whole building, install new lighting, fix the plumbing, and maybe even build some new, safer kennels. For free. We'll even see if we can get some materials donated." She just stared at me. Her eyes started to well up with tears. She put down the brush she was holding and took off her gloves. Then she did something I didn't expect. She gave me a huge hug. "Young man," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you have no idea what this means. We've been praying for a miracle. No lecture, no suspicion, no insults, just gratitude. It felt good. It felt right. This was what community was supposed to feel like. So, we started our own project at the animal shelter. The first weekend, we just did a full assessment. I went through the entire building, mapping out the ancient electrical system. Mike scoped out the plumbing. Dave checked the structural integrity of the kennels and the foundation. It was a mess, just as we expected. But it was a fixable mess. Mrs. Gable gave us a set of keys and told us to treat the place like our own. The trust was immediate and total. It was refreshing. We put together a plan and a list of materials. I knew some guys at the local electrical supply house. I explained the situation, told them it was a charity project for the animal shelter. The manager gave us all the wire, breakers, and fixtures at a deep discount, and threw in a few boxes of outlets for free. Mike had a similar connection at the plumbing supply, and got a deal on copper pipe and fixtures. People want to help when you're doing something good. It's that simple. The next Saturday, we got to work. The contrast between this work site and the one at the Haven was night and day. There was no drama, no ideology, just work. We had a system. Dave and a couple of other guys we roped in did the demolition, tearing out the old rusty kennels and the rotted drywall. I followed behind them, pulling out the old wiring and running new conduit. Mike came after me, laying in the new water lines for the cleaning stations. We worked from morning till evening, fueled by coffee and donuts that Mrs. Gable and her volunteers brought us. They never got in the way. They just asked if we needed anything, made sure we were fed, and thanked us about 100 times a day. The atmosphere was positive. We'd have music playing on a portable radio. We'd joke around. It was hard work, but it was satisfying. The shelter's social media page started posting updates about our progress, but their posts were different from Tiana's. They weren't about grand statements. They were just simple, honest updates. Week 1, a huge thank you to Philip and Mike and Dave for volunteering their time. They've already removed all the old unsafe kennels. The picture was of us, covered in dirt and sweat, standing in front of a huge pile of scrap metal. We looked exhausted, but happy. Week 2, the new wiring is going in. Soon our furry residents will have bright, warm lighting. These guys are miracle workers. The picture was of me up on a ladder, feeding wire through the ceiling joists. The comments on these posts were amazing. People from all over town were cheering us on. Some even started a small fundraiser to help pay for the discounted materials. We felt like we were part of the community again. Our skills were valued. We were respected. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the Haven project had ground to a complete halt. I drove by one day and saw the building. It looked worse than ever. The yard was full of rain-soaked piles of debris they'd never hauled away. A blue tarp was nailed over a section of the roof where they had probably created a leak. There were no cars in the parking lot, no volunteers. The place looked abandoned again. Only this time, it was a self-inflicted wound. Dave's cousin told him that the group had pretty much disintegrated. The constant failures and lack of progress had drained all the enthusiasm. Most of the volunteers had just stopped showing up. Tiana apparently was blaming everyone but herself. She claimed the volunteers lacked commitment and that their internalized misogyny made them give up when things got hard. It was never her fault, of course. It was the fault of the world that wasn't living up to her expectations. The tipping point came a few weeks later. I got a call from one of the volunteer firefighters I know. He was laughing so hard he could barely speak. He told me they had just gotten a call to the old community hall. It wasn't a fire, thankfully. It was a medical assist. Apparently, the last handful of Tiana's followers had decided to make one final push to get the electrical working. One of them, trying to wire a new outlet without turning off the power, had gotten a nasty shock. She wasn't seriously injured, he said, just a jolt that threw her back. But she was terrified and had called an ambulance. Standard procedure for a workplace accident, even a volunteer one, is a follow-up from the city. The next morning, the city's building inspector showed up at the Haven. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall for that. The inspector was a guy named George. He's a no-nonsense by-the-book veteran who has seen everything. According to the story that made the rounds later, George walked in, took one look around, and his jaw hit the floor. He saw the amateur electrical work, with exposed wires and overloaded junction boxes. He saw the main support beam in the basement that had been notched to run a pipe through, dangerously compromising its integrity. He saw the water damage from the plumbing disaster, which was now growing a nice crop of black mold. He saw the half-demolished wall that was threatening to collapse. He walked through the building for almost an hour, just shaking his head and taking notes on a clipboard. Tiana was apparently following him around, trying to explain her vision. She told him they were learning as they went, that it was a process of empowerment. George wasn't impressed by her buzzwords. He deals in codes and safety, not ideologies. He finished his inspection, went out to his truck, and came back with a huge bright red sticker. He slapped it right on the middle of the front door. Unsafe for occupancy, all work to cease immediately. By order of the city building department. He told Tiana that the building was now officially condemned until a licensed and insured contractor was hired to undo all the damage they had done and bring the entire structure up to code. He handed her a report that was pages and pages long, detailing every single violation. The project was dead. She had not only failed to build her haven, she had made the building significantly worse than it was when she started. The fallout was swift and brutal. The local paper ran a front-page story. Community project halted due to gross safety violations. The article included quotes from George the inspector, who called the work a disaster waiting to happen and the most dangerously amateur construction I have seen in my 30-year career. The article also mentioned, as a small but crucial detail, that a group of local tradesmen had offered their professional help for free at the beginning of the project, but had been publicly rejected by the organizers. The comments section on the newspaper's website was an absolute bloodbath. Everyone in town, it seemed, had an opinion. The overwhelming sentiment was that Tiana's arrogance and ideology had led directly to this failure. People were furious that their city grant money had been wasted. The Women Rise Collective Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Tiana tried to do damage control. She posted a long, rambling statement. She didn't apologize. She didn't take any responsibility. Instead, she blamed the building inspector, calling his report an attack by the patriarchal establishment. She blamed the city for having unnecessarily complex regulations designed to keep women out of the trades. She even blamed the woman who had gotten the shock, implying she had been careless. It was a masterclass in narcissism, but nobody was buying it anymore. The final nail in the coffin came from within her own group. Katie, the one who had looked uncomfortable when we were rejected, finally had enough. She wrote a long public post on her own page, officially announcing her resignation from the collective. She wrote that she had joined the group with good intentions, but had become disillusioned by a leadership that valued performative ideology over actual results, and, more importantly, over people's safety. She said that pride and a refusal to accept help had destroyed a project that could have done real good. She ended her post by publicly apologizing to the local tradesmen who offered their expertise from the beginning and were treated so disrespectfully. That was it. The collective imploded. The grant was rescinded by the city, and a lien was placed on the building to cover the costs of having it secured. The haven was now officially a ruin, and Tiana was a local laughingstock. A couple of months went by. Our work at the animal shelter was complete. The place was transformed. We had installed new bright LED lighting everywhere. All the wiring was safe and up to code. Every kennel had a new automatic watering system that Mike had designed, and Dave had led the team in building a whole new block of spacious, clean, secure kennels out of concrete block and chain link. The shelter looked amazing. The animals were happier. The volunteers were ecstatic. Mrs. Gable decided to hold a grand reopening event to thank the community and show off the new facility. The whole town was invited. The day of the event was incredible. Hundreds of people showed up. The local news was there. There was a barbecue, and families were touring the new kennels. Kids were playing with puppies. It was just a purely happy, positive community event. During the ceremony, Mrs. Gable stood up to give a speech. She thanked everyone for their donations. And then she called me, Mike, and Dave up to the front. We were not expecting it. We stood there awkwardly as she told the whole town what we had done. She didn't just thank us, she praised our skill, our dedication, and our generosity. She called us pillars of the community and examples of the best our town has to offer. When we were in desperate need, she said to the crowd, these men didn't see a problem. They saw a chance to help. They asked for nothing in return, and they gave us everything. This shelter, this beautiful, safe place for our animals, would not be here today without them. The entire crowd burst into applause. It wasn't a short, polite clap. It was a genuine, heartfelt standing ovation. I'm not an emotional guy, but I felt a lump in my throat. All we had ever wanted was to use our skills to do some good. After all the humiliation and rejection from Tiana, this was validation. Pure and simple. After the speech, as we were grabbing a burger, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around. It was Katie. She looked different, less stressed, calmer. Hi, she said quietly. Hey, I replied. There was an awkward pause. I just wanted to find you and say it in person, she said, looking me right in the eye. I'm so sorry for how you were treated that day. It was wrong. There's no excuse for it. She gestured around at the happy crowd and the renewed shelter. What you guys did here? It's incredible. This is what it's supposed to be about. I looked at her. I could have been a jerk about it. I could have gloated. But what was the point? The world had already delivered the verdict. So I just gave her a small smile and a nod. Water under the bridge, I said. We just wanted to help. She nodded, a look of relief on her face. Well, you certainly did. She walked away, and I rejoined my friends. We stood there, watching families adopt dogs and cats, taking them home from the safe, solid building we had helped to build. Mike clapped me on the back. You know, he said, I think this turned out a whole lot better. I looked over at the happy chaos, at the tangible result of our work. He was right. We hadn't built the haven. We had built a haven, and that was more than enough.